In this tutorial in Tyler Pro, we're going to look at how to customize the Spotlight filter tool. We're using Tyler Pro version 1.5. We've already given you a tutorial on how to take that Spotlight filter and apply it into a title. So you might want to watch that one before you look at this particular exercise. But in this tutorial, we're going to show you how to take one of those 33 presets we talked about before and customize it. What I'd like to show you is I have an example here of a car ad, and I'm going to apply the Spotlight filter to the background. That's the gradient you see behind everything else in this particular title. So I go to the Library tab, I click on Effects, I click on Filters, and then off of Filters I click on Spotlight, and that gives me all my presets. Now I could begin adjusting this with any of these particular presets, but I'll just pick one I kind of like called Blind Spot. So I'll double click on that, and it will immediately add the spotlight to the shape of my background. So what I'm going to do is see if I can make some changes here. What are all these tools and how can I use them? Well, the first thing I want to do in this particular case, and we'll reset this, what I want to do is I want to make the spot a little bit more to the left. The reddish area will be to the left, and then I also want to maybe feather it a little more. So I can control the location of my spotlight with these controls here. I'll begin to move it a little bit left. I'll click on the center and move it over a little bit, and I'll move it a little bit down, and I kind of like that there. If I want to change the angle of the light, the tilt of it, I can move this from the center anywhere. Watch what happens when I move it right, all the way to the left, upper left corner, upper right corner, lower right corner, and bottom center. I'll leave it just about, well, you know, I kind of like it over here. It doesn't look too bad. I'll leave it right there. You can adjust it according to whatever you like. Now you can also change the size of your spotlight. The default was 40, and I can go down and make it smaller, or I can take my slider and make it much richer and deeper if I want to. I think I'll leave it somewhere in that range. That looks pretty good. And then you can change the feathering. The feathering is how soft or hard the edges are around the spotlight. If I take it down, I get a very sharp one to 0. And then again, if I move it to the right, it becomes more and more blur. Well, that's not too bad. Now, what is the transparent background? Well, let's find out. I'm going to click on transparent background. And what that did was it took all the color that was in the background of that particular shape, which was my full screen background, and it made it go away. I can't see it. I don't need it anymore. So you can actually apply this kind of filter on a background of any kind and click this, and the filter will do all the work. But I like the background as it was, so I'll leave it unchecked. Then we have two identical sets of controls. One is for the spotlight, one is for the background. Both of them have certain defaults in the preset. Right now, my tint is white, and it's set to a -100. This adjusts the strength of my tint. So let's see what happens if I change that. I go from -100. The closer I get to 0, the more it goes toward invisible. And I set my tint to the right, and now it's inverted. That's not a bad look either, is it? So we'll go back to the way we were before. I like the -100. I can change the tint. What does the color do? Well, that affects the saturation. At the higher values, it's more intense. At the lower values, it fades to black and white. So again, there's black and white on the left, and there's really hot on the right. And so we'll leave it kind of default near the middle here. That's fine. Brightness adjusts the background brightness for either the spotlight or the background. This is the background, this is the spotlight. They're identical controls. And again, you can play with that to make it kind of be whatever you want to. Clarity is something I don't see using a lot. It adjusts the dynamic range. Then the blur adjusts anything from a light haze to a severe defocus. So I start with 100 and I'll back down to 0. And again, in this particular case, it doesn't make a radical change. You can modify your spotlight filter and adjust only the spotlight. Or if you want to, you can also make the same controls on the background. And again, these are the same kinds of features. The default here is all these are set to 0 and the tint is set to white. Let's change the tint color for fun. Let's change the tint to black and see what happens. Well, right now I don't see a big change because all these are still 0. So in this case, if these are set to 0, looks like I can make it any color I want and it won't basically affect the outcome. But I think most of the time, if you're like me, I'm going to be working on the spotlight itself and not so much on the background. This is just a brief look at how you can modify the controls. You can take these controls and actually make any preset here look like any other preset, because all they did was they adjusted the controls. Let me pull another one up just for fun. Let's take the center boost. And here again we have 2 in the center. These numbers are different here. And this one happens to be a -10 instead of 0. And the clarity and the color are adjusted. Let's look at another one, for example. This is a great way to learn how to build one. Let's try Searchlight. What did they do in the Searchlight? Well, the center is over here. They've got the angle set. Watch what happens when I change the angle. Okay, I can move it anywhere I want. And also the size. Okay. And then I can also change the size this way. And the feathering, I can make it what it is, or I can make it crisp, very sharp there. Or I can adjust it this way. What they did, they also adjusted the clarity here. And then when it came to tint, you know, they took the color all the way down, so that took the background out. But if I bring the color back in, this is what I have on this one. And they have the brightness way down, so I can take the brightness up or leave it back where I found it and change the blur of the background as well. So there are actually an infinite number of adjustments you can make for any of these, but it's a great way to add a lot of visual enjoyment to the titles that you create in Titler Pro.